Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. On the day before the weekend, time seemed to drag on painfully slowly. Oliver, the security guard at the big bank, was lolling tiredly from foot to foot and kept glancing at his watch. Lunchtime was over, but he could not stand still for another hour. How he longed to be inside his apartment for a hot home cooked meal, but he had yet to live to see it. Tonight I'm taking my wife to a new restaurant 2 blocks away. His partner told him. Remember, we'd been walking around here for a week handing out flyers to passersby. That way, your madam has taste, Oliver grumbled back. And where does she get the money to go to restaurants? Do you work on the side? You could at least tell me. As a friend, share. Dennis pressed his lips together, looking at the constantly disgruntled man. Oliver was not an agreeable man, but what can you do? You can't choose your colleagues. He had to work side by side. Most of the time he was in a bad mood, treated bank customers with excessive suspicion and even contempt. He had no large sums to deposit, and he was choked with envy at the sight of well-groomed bankers in business suits who were looked on by women. Friday was not to Oliver's liking. The bank room was crowded with nervous people who had decided to finish all the business at the end of the week. They talked among themselves, jostled, and pestered the employees with a lot of silly questions. Couldn't they get everything done in time? The heat was unbearable. The air conditioners were not doing their job. The man's attention was caught by a boy of about 8 who had climbed the steps and confidently entered the building. What does he want here? The guard muttered, giving the poorly dressed child an unkind look. He became wary. What if he's a pickpocket? What a fuss that would make. If someone catches a thief by the hand right in the department, there will be unnecessary fuss. And the man did not like to perform his other duties, except standing on duty. He never needed it much, letting his partner do everything himself. After all, there was only one way out of this. If the boy did something wrong, he'd get caught right away. It wouldn't take him long. That thought reassured Oliver. Despite his shabby clothes and suspicious looks from the adults, who thought that now he would stretch out his hand and beg for their bread, the boy was not embarrassed and confidently took the cue for a voucher. Having received it, the boy went to the credit department and settled down on a bench, occasionally glancing at the scoreboard. "Boy, are you lost?" asked him a young bank teller as he sat down opposite. "How do you do?" "No, I'm here on business. I need a credit," he said firmly, looking at her without hesitation. She smiled indulgently and looked at her cheerful colleagues. "Look, you are in a serious institution. Only adults decide things here, so don't fool around. Go home. Otherwise, I'll call security, and they'll contact your parents. I don't think they'll like your pranks. Am I right?" But the kid wouldn't budge. "Look, I'm not kidding. Here's my mom's passport. I need a loan in her name. She's sick. She needs an operation. She can't come by herself. She's handicapped. They give me alms on the street, but it's not enough. No one takes me to work. I have no one but my mother. Please help me. You can do it. It's not that simple. We don't give money to everyone who wants it, okay? You're too young to understand it. Just don't argue. Go home," the loan officer insisted, hoping the child would stop arguing. The sad story of the boy attracted the attention of the staff, but they could do nothing to help him. He was smart beyond his years and had a better mind than his peers. At first they thought it was just another inspection, which usually took place a couple of times a month without warning to improve the efficiency of the department. After such an event, the employees were repeatedly reprimanded for paying a lot of attention to hopeless customers whose visits did not bring the bank any benefit. They were often visited by the poor, the handicapped, the fire, ravaged, and other unfortunates with broken lives who urgently needed money. Each bank employee could name a dozen heart-wrenching stories they had to turn a blind eye to because of the institution's policies. If you gave away money to everyone, you could end up with nothing. So the employees have learned not to react emotionally to the problems of others. "Honey, I'm sorry," they told him, "but no bank will take out a loan for your mom if she doesn't make any money. You came in for nothing. There won't be any money. You'd better get used to the idea and don't hold up the line." "No, you don't understand. My mom really needs the surgery. She can't get back on her feet without it. I'm not going anywhere. You have to serve me. Do something." Tears glistened in the boy's eyes. He tried to be strong, to ignore those around him, but he could not hold back any longer. As soon as he thought about the fate of his family, his voice went hoarse and the tears poured down by themselves. An employee decided to interrupt the child's tantrums harshly and called for a security guard. Oliver loomed over him with a menacing look, indignant that he was forced to leave his post and move a little because of this youngster. "What? Have you been disrupting public order since you were little?" With a firm hand, the man grabbed the boy lightly by the jacket and dragged him toward the exit like a doll. The boy wiggled his legs and kept crying out for help, but no one stepped in to help him. The bank's customers parted, hoping that someone else's restless, untidy-looking child wouldn't touch them with his dirty hands, which were probably full of all kinds of harmful stuff. At the gate, to his annoyance, the guard saw Max, a 32-year-old banker who was the manager of the branch. Handsome, well-groomed, educated, the man was radically different from the guard by his manners and appearance, and yes, by his hobbies. At the sight of him, Oliver always lowered his eyes, examining the polished boots of his expensive leather shoes. What kind of a show? The steward was surprised, looking at the clutched, crying child. "Put him on the floor." "Whose boy is this? Where are the parents?" "Oh, he went around here. He wanted to get a loan. He got hysterical and disrupted my work." Not noticing the contempt in the eyes of the new adult, Dennis decided not to waste any time. "Man, help me, please. I'm sorry for distracting the workers, but my family is in a desperate situation. My mom needs a loan for an operation. It's just the two of us. There's no one to help." Max was surprised at the boy's courage and gently stroked his head. He believed in the sincerity of his words, no matter how absurd the situation seemed from the outside. "Don't worry. You haven't caused anyone any trouble. We'll go up to my office now and talk it over. We'll see if there's anything we can do to help you." The guard escorted them out with an unkind smile. It's always this smart guy who's the nicest, acting like he's the boss, setting his own rules, even though he's under the boss himself. He'd better raise the employee salaries, or he'd be ashamed to show his face in front of his acquaintances. For a long time, the man avoided meeting his classmates. He did not dare to meet the parents of his beloved. Since childhood, it seemed to him that he deserved more, that he should walk around in a fancy suit, a tea with a briefcase in his hands, and conduct business conversations. However, fate decided otherwise, and now Oliver wore a uniform with the lettering all over his back. But Max made money out of thin airs, and was a member of several charitable organizations, regularly donating large sums for seriously ill children and homeless animals. What was the point of this if the bank employees were suffering? Oliver did not understand. Meanwhile, Dennis was taking the elevator up to the office. The architecture of the building surprised him. The boy had never been in such places before, but he tried not to stare too blatantly. His mother scolded him for that. They had always lived poorly. She didn't want her child to poke and prod like a savage and admire loudly. Max's curiosity was not a burden. He chuckled as he saw the boy trying hard to hide his interest. Being able to hold his own was a new reason why the man wanted to hear the boy out in peace. Come in. He opened the door in front of him, pointing to a cushioned chair across from his desk. The boy sat happily in it, but folded his arms in front of him modestly. "Shall I buy you some tea? Are you hungry?" "No, thank you. You are very kind, Dennis answered confidently. You are a funny fellow. Well, Max moved his chair and ordered the cookies over the phone anyway. Jennifer, tell me, what's the matter with you? My mother is very ill. She has a spinal injury. She can't walk. And I have to look for money in any way I can. I'm begging on the street. I know it's not good, and people come across all kinds of things, pushing me aside and hurting me, but I have no choice. Where can I work at 8 years old? Dennis muttered, sighing noisily. We used to be fine, and then last year my mom got run over right in a crosswalk. Some rich guy. Mom couldn't get the license plate, but she saw that the car was expensive and conspicuous. The police didn't do anything. Mom was questioned several times, but they couldn't find the culprit. We live alone, we have no father, no relatives, and no one to stand up for us. Others are helped by relatives and connections. But we have only us, and we have to stick together. That's what my mother says. And now she lies down, sometimes moving to the stroller, but she can't cope with household chores, so I have to do it. I don't go to school now. Mom cries a lot because of this. A divisional policeman came to us, and the school called. They say my mom isn't able to take care of me, and if this continues, they'll take me away from her and send me to an orphanage, and I don't want to go there. I have an apartment and a mother. Is that right? Is that right, Uncle? It's not like my mother's hurting me. It's not her fault she can't walk and earn money. If only they could find someone who did it, who paid for the operation. So I decided to take out a loan with her passport. They won't give me any money, I know, but she's an adult. I've seen on TV how it's done. Here, take it. Dennis, put the passport on the table, or do you need anything else? We'll give it back, honestly, just not right away. The man sighed. He was already doubting his decision to get involved in this story. The boy's fate was not an easy one to envy, but one sob story was not enough. Who knows them, these crooks? What they are capable of in the name of profit. What if they send their children to the bank for a loan? Maybe the documents are fake too. Max wasn't greedy, and he had a good heart, but he was not the owner of the bank, and he only got the position 2 years ago, and he liked it. The competition in their field was great. Everyone strove to take his place and sit on it. The manager was pleased with the man's work, but he kept a strict eye on everything, so that there were no machinations or secret documentation. If he was found guilty of anything illegal, if the bank suffered losses through his fault, he would be in trouble. So as not to give the boy false hopes, he said, I don't promise that you and your mother will get the money, but I will explore your options. And the man was dumbfounded as he opened the woman's passport and saw a familiar face in the photo, soft features, dark hair, and blue, laughing eyes. Max did not remember her name, but he could not forget that face. How small the world is. People say that phrase all the time for nothing coincidences. But at that very moment, the man was shocked by the tricks of fate. With the boy's mother, he knew the boy very well. They were connected by a short but wonderful time together. His memories of the incident were good. Even his wife did not know about the story. Uncle, aren't you feeling well? Can you call someone? The boy got up anxiously and got ready to run out of the office and call one of the adults. He could have called a doctor if he had to. With his handicapped mother, he had learned to make quick decisions. Dennis only looked like a child on the outside, but he was very different from his peers because of the dramatic changes in his life. No, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I think I can help your mom. But we should get to know each other first, don't you think? Dennis nodded happily. A truly childlike smile appeared on his serious face, which he rarely showed. There were few occasions to do so. Max glanced at his wristwatch. I still have things to do. Wait for me here for a bite to eat. I'll be done by then, and I'll take you home to discuss it with your mother. All right, Chuckles. Thank you very much. Dennis, who could not remember his own joy, ran to the man and hugged him, unable to hold back his tears. He no longer had any hope of help after the antics of the guard who had unceremoniously dragged him outside. You are very kind. We will never forget that. I will be able to stay with Mommy, thanks to you. It was at least 3 hours before Max was able to take his mind off the phone, the papers, and the calculator. His head was buzzing from all the hard work, and his thoughts about Emma constantly displaced everything else. He glanced several times at the boy, who was waiting patiently in his chair. He had received several of 4 sheets of paper and was quietly fiddling with them, making airplanes and ships. The man was amazed at how steady and inconspicuous an 8-year-old could be. Boys his age usually stomped, screamed, climbed everywhere, and touched things that did not belong to them. Apparently, he had to grow up early and realize the responsibility. He had no right to be careless. That thought hurt his heart. He could concentrate on nothing else and decided to take his work home with him. More exciting problems had to be solved, or there would be no rest. Dennis, get ready. We'll go now. Wait for me in the hall. I'll be there in a few minutes. All right. All right, the boy nodded obediently and stacked all the sheets on the table. The guard kept glancing at his watch. Just 30 minutes to go. He saw the poor boy again, only this time he was sitting on the bench, dangling his feet and humming happily to himself. The man was curious and came closer. Why are you so happy, kid? Go home, your mother must have lost it. Nice bank you have here, smiled Dennis. The nice man said he'd give us a loan. Just have to meet my mom. And that aunt said she couldn't do anything. She just does not know how to work. This information raised Oliver's eyebrows in surprise. The man had another reason for keeping a close eye on all the decisions of his boss. The fact is that a few months ago, after work, a luxury car pulled up to him, which the security guard could not have dreamed of. Oliver, get in, there's business to do. Soon the man was sitting in the leather interior opposite the stranger. It was Thomas, a banker, considered a rival of Max, who had collected dirt on him in the walls of the bank, where he himself was not a member. He needed a man to secretly gather information on him until a major infraction was discovered behind the boss. And no matter how much the bank owner valued the talent in his face, he would not forgive unprofitable blunders. It was not in his nature. You're a smart guy, Thomas said to the guard. You are worth a lot more money than you make in this miserable security firm. Help me out, and I'll make it worth your while. Well, I can report. I've got the right job for it. No one's going to walk by or walk out if I don't let them. The man's got his nose up. I've made a name for myself in the army. Our commander appreciated me very much. How quickly we hit it off. You're a clever fellow. He grinned. I have a feeling our partnership will be fruitful. And when I take over from Max, you can be sure I won't forget you. I have faith in you. You'll be a great leader, I have no doubt. Oliver understood at once what kind of person his new boss was and decided not to lose time, because this chance comes once in a lifetime. Meeting Thomas was his lucky ticket, so the man resorted to his favorite trick, flattery. I thought I was the only one who couldn't see the rotten nature of the boss. I admire your perceptive mind. He has charmed everybody around him, but he's not what he seems. There's certainly something about him, if you just dig a little deeper. I won't let him out of my sight. I'll report to you every day on every move he makes. I'm sure you'll get what you want very soon. Oliver accepted the offer without a moment's hesitation. He had never refused easy money, and this was a double benefit, to make money and to screw over his boss. Oliver doesn't like him, no matter how you slice it. He's all right, with his manicure and his head held high. He has been on Secret Service ever since. Only Max was not involved in anything criminal. Until this day. In his mind, the man was already rubbing his hands together. He knew Thomas would like his news very much. Apparently, it was time to oust the snooty man. He had another reason to secretly sneer at his boss. He'd been in contact with Thomas quite often and had seen him in different guises and at different times of the day, often with a lady. This lady turned out to be Max's wife. Oliver learned of this by chance when he saw the boss with his wife during dinner and recognized her as Thomas's mistress. Thomas made him promise not to talk, threatening to make his life a living hell if everything was revealed, but the man never crossed such a serious man. He valued what he had and wanted to serve him well, waiting for the cherished honors when he became manager. For the long drive back to Max's apartment, he was silent. He was immersed in his own thoughts and didn't even hear the boys ranting, apologizing in advance for the mess in the apartment and the fact that they didn't have anything to treat him to. The man was not a romantic. That wasn't how he'd been raised, but there was a familiar thrill in his chest at the thought of seeing Emma in just a few minutes. He didn't tell anyone that he sometimes thought about how it might happen, but none of the options suggested such dire circumstances. It would be difficult for a woman to show up in front of him in such a state, but it was necessary. Dennis lived with his mother in a 2-bedroom apartment. It hadn't been renovated in a long time, but it used to be cleaned regularly by caring women's hands, and now the room seemed cold and lonely. "Mom, it's me!" the boy shouted from the doorway, dropping his old sneakers as he went. "Dennis, what took you so long?" A worried woman's voice came from the bedroom. "How many times have I told you not to stay out? I can't go looking for you." "Don't worry about it. I brought my uncle from the bank. He'll help." "Hello, Emma. Emma." Max walked over to the bed and looked at the one he had never forgotten. Her gorgeous hair was now pulled into a dull braid. Shadows of weariness lingered beneath her clear, cunning eyes, and her face was drained. But none of this frightened the man. He sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. "Do you remember me? I'm Max. We met 8 years ago. I was on my way back from a business trip, and I blew 2 tires in your village. I had 1 spare tire, but driving without the other, even in a downpour, seemed suicidal. I barely made it off, rode through your neck of the woods and knocked on the first house. You opened the door for me. You must remember something else." The man squinted at the boy, not knowing how to voice in front of him that there had been intimacy between him and his mother that night. Emma opened her eyes frightenedly, looking at the man, and hurriedly called out to her son, "Kitten, please see what we have for dinner. Come on, don't look at me like that. The grown-ups need to talk." When the door closed behind the boy, the woman turned to her guest. "So you are the Max?" She smiled faintly. Her sister was telling the truth. "You are as handsome as she described." "What sister?" He did not understand. "In your memories, it's not me. It's my oldest sister, and we're not twins. We just look very much alike." Everyone was confused, even the neighbors sometimes. There was a sad smile on Emma's face. "Only Anne is long gone. She died in childbirth. A terrible complication, and no good doctor was found nearby. By the time we got a car from town, it was too late. Who Dennis' daddy was, I never found out. She had some kind of secret love, but she kept her secret strictly to herself. I had to replace the baby with a mother." "My condolences." The guest barely spoke. The news of Anne's death and her child's death completely threw him off balance. His thoughts danced around him feverishly and did not merge into a coherent picture. It seemed as if he had just grasped the most important thing. But no, he hadn't. He had expected to see Anne, paralyzed but alive, and now he didn't know how to be. Memories began to surface one by one. Max, very young, unmarried, on his first independent business trip. When he reached the village after the car situation, the door to the first house was opened to him by a charming Anne. She let him in, listened, warmed him up, and gave him his father's old things. In the girl was at once noticeable housewifely. The small wooden house was cozy, not a speck of dust, despite the creaking in the wind shutters and the peeling paint on the floorboards. The young people had talked a lot that night, and from the first minute they had met, they both felt an inexplicable kinship. You might think that only happens in the movies, but few people can boast of recognizing their man right away. "You'll think I'm talking nonsense," Max said, sitting next to Anne in the modestly furnished kitchen. "But I feel like I've known you for 100 years. My heart ticked, too." The boy carefully reached out and tucked a dark strand of hair behind her ear that had fallen out of her high ponytail. Then he gently stroked her cheek and, meeting no resistance, leaned closer for a kiss. The night flew by like the blink of an eye, but it was a time to remember for the rest of their lives. No one regretted anything, but as they said goodbye, it was clear that it would not happen again. The day after tomorrow, Anne asked a neighbor to help her friend by sharing a spare tire. Max wanted to pay for it, but the man waved his hand cordially. "Why are you giving me a piece of paper? You give it to me, take it. A simple thank you is enough for me. Just don't hurt Anne's feelings. She's a good girl," said the neighbor. "This little village adventure left a deep mark on my soul." Unselfish people surprised him with their kindness and reception, and Anne forever remained in his memory. Then he could not submit to his desires, could not leave everything for a life in the middle of nowhere, so he left there and made a decision never to return. It was hard for him to imagine that she, so bright, so brave, so perky, was no longer alive. Suddenly the man was awakened. The boy could be his son. The timing was right. "I'm sorry for your loss, Julius," Emma said softly, looking at the guest. "With the news has made you pale. You must have cared for your sister as much as she cared for you." "You are right. I'm sorry, I didn't expect it. It's all so sudden, I can't get it into my head." Max became more and more frustrated by the minute. He could feel the anger rising inside him. It was as if he had been deceived, tricked around his finger. And if he had listened to his heart, then, instead of thinking with his parents' head, he would have been a happy family man. He would have married Anne. She would have borne him a son. And he would never have let his beloved die. They would live for their own pleasure, not giving a damn about the opinions of others. The man lost everything all at once, not even being able to enjoy it. 8 years ago, when he returned from a business trip, he began to behave differently. Father and mother immediately noticed the change in their son's behavior and realized that another woman was to blame. "How dare you go out with girls? You have a wedding coming up," his father shouted at him. "If your affairs become known to her family, they'll skin us. No one, you hear, no one will recognize us. All you had to do is marry Suzanne. She's the key to your success. I always told you you had to be among the rich to live well. And if you're a nobody and you're striving upward without proper support, you'll never be recognized as one of your own. They'll think you're fighting for something you're not worthy of." "I don't care." Max couldn't stand it. "I don't want any wealth. It's your dream, and I only have one woman. She's serious. I'm in love, okay? No Suzanne is a match for her. I'll be happy with Anne." "Stop yelling at each other." Her mother ran into the room, stunned by her men's loud argument. "Calm down, both of you. This is a difficult time for everyone. We need to calm down and act as we planned." No amount of argument from the boy made the father and mother take his side. Their family had always lived modestly, but the couple had worked hard to give their son a brilliant education. They hoped that their child would never know want or experience the hardships they had faced in their time. He respected his parents. For the first time, when he seriously fell in love, he allowed himself to raise his voice to his family. Previously, he had listened to them and not crossed them. A sense of duty had been instilled in the man, and he could not give it all up after a single night with the village beauty. Mother was right. Who knows how she would have behaved in the relationship? Things might not have worked out between them, and he would have lost a lucrative match. Now all the fears and doubts seemed ridiculous to the man. He should have chosen Anne, should have raised his son, if Dennis by him. Married Suzanne, but their marriage could not be called happy. At first, the kinship with the wealthy bore fruit. The man was quickly promoted, but not without his personal efforts and skills. He gained confidence, as his father had said. But that was where the good things ended. The heiress of a multi-million-dollar fortune was in no way an ideal wife. Suzanne had grown up in luxury and had no intention of maintaining the domesticity of the family nest. She was a cheerful woman, I'll give her that. She and her husband had much in common. Only she liked to have fun and show off for her friends. The first problems between the spouses began almost immediately. Husband was annoyed that his wife was busy only spending money. She was constantly visiting beauty salons, boutique social events, arranged parties with girlfriends, and their home with alcohol and a lot of strangers. Eventually he got the expected promotion and went off to work. She was glad her spouse was no longer reprimanding her for her behavior. With each month of their marriage, there were fewer and fewer strings between them than before. Besides, the woman flatly refused to have children. "Oh, leave me alone. You too. My mother is always pushing, asking for grandchildren. My father's worried that I'm going to be an old mother, and I don't want kids at all, or not right now. Look at my body." She defiantly took off her clothes. "Do you agree that all this will blow up? You're not a woman. You don't understand. I don't want to turn into a nursing hippo. There's nothing wrong with being pregnant. It's a natural state of being a woman. If you're afraid I'll like you less with a few extra pounds, you're very wrong. I love you in every way." The guy would kiss his spouse affectionately and she would give in, but she never agreed. Now the marriage looked more and more like some sort of arrangement, a contract. He rarely saw Suzanne and was even glad of it, devoting himself to his work. Sometimes he worried about his future, but thought that there would be a better time to think things over and decide how to proceed. He stayed at the apartment until late in the evening. Together with Dennis, he went to the store and bought groceries for the family. Emma persuaded him not to take care of them, but the man was adamant. He stared at the child for a long time, looking for familiar features in him, and deep inside, he had already recognized that the boy was his son and was looking for confirmation of that. On Monday morning, Max showed up at the bank with the express intention of taking out a loan on Emma. He planned to pay it off on his own. Despite his good salary, he didn't have a sum of money available that could pay off the surgery debt immediately. But he was willing to accept any hardship to allow her to walk and the baby to stay with his mother. This became the man's first priority. Now he could think of nothing but his baby. That same evening, he visited the family to tell them the good news. "I don't know how to thank you, Max." The woman cried as she hugged her son. It was as if Dennis was glued to his mother and listened to every word the adult said. "I will get a job. As soon as I get out of rehab, I'll pay back every penny. Do you want me to write you a receipt? Let's take it to a notary. I can't believe it's true. You've helped us out so much." "Calm down. You don't need anything. The important thing is that the boy stays with you. I'll pay everything myself. It's my duty. I think I owe it to Anne. Things might have turned out differently if I hadn't left then. It's not your fault. Don't even think about it. You're a very decent man. I have never met such a man before." Max corresponded with the woman every day. He felt the need to communicate with Dennis, and with her too. The man was interested in just talking to someone who wasn't talking about a lip augmentation procedure, hair extensions, or limiting himself to professional conversations. In the moment of talking to his family, he felt truly alive. He had been so passionate about work for so long, communicating only on business matters, that he didn't notice how he lost most of his friends. Marriage had severed many ties. Some friends considered him a calculating careerist who used a successful marriage to achieve success. Others simply envied him. A red diploma from the Finance Academy came in handy for the man, and they were unable to fulfill themselves. While Max rejoiced in life looking at funny photos of the child, an unseen threat loomed over him. After the boy showed up at the bank, the security guard took advantage of his friendship with some colleagues and found out that his boss had indeed taken out a loan in the name of a certain Emma. Convinced of the reality of the transaction, the man reported everything to Thomas. "I'm sending you a picture of the contract," he said into the phone. "Good work, Oliver, but do not tell anyone for the joy of it." "Got it. I'll keep my mouth shut." Once again, coming home around midnight, her husband found Suzanne at home. His wife kissed him with her scarlet lips, surrounding him with the thick scent of perfume. "You're up late." "Hi. I didn't expect to see you at all. End of the block, checking the accounts. My head is already bloated with these numbers. But the man lied, loosening his tie as he went. He spent that evening, as he had the week before, at his new acquaintance's house, getting used to their cozy apartment. Emma protested, but he only helped with the lessons, so that the boy did not fall behind the curriculum and the teachers did not disturb the already restless woman. It turned out that the boy had a talent for adding and subtracting numbers in his head. You are such a hard worker." Suzanne smiled as she parted her hair and snuggled up against her husband from behind. "It wouldn't be fair if that boss of yours didn't appreciate such sacrifices." Thin fingers with long nails encircled the man. But there was something in his wife's tone that didn't set him up for love games. "I have nothing to worry about. I don't let my superiors down," she replied, getting rid of the embrace. The next day, just before he was about to leave for lunch, his boss burst into the office. "Good afternoon. What brings you here? Would you like to have lunch together?" "I was just about to—" "You lying idiot," the man shouted, slamming the door behind him so as not to attract the attention of the other employees. "I give you my business, my complete freedom, and you want to stab me in the back. Will you please calm down and tell me what this is about? What are you accusing me of?" "It's a nice place you got here. It's been a long time since I've been here. So you thought you could command the parade yourself. I can smell guys like you a mile away. You're good, you fooled me. You seem pedantic and honest. I know about your scam. Are you trying to launder money through me, making shady deals? Look, I have nothing to do with any dishonest activities," he said firmly, which only made the man angrier. "Get out of here now, with all your clothes, and don't come back. You'll pay off this loan in 2 months, or you'll have a lawsuit on your hands. Get out of here before they put you out on the street in front of everybody." Max tried to talk sense into the boss, but he would not listen. The man realized the loan in Emma's name had been taken for fraud. But who needed it? He decided to deal with everything later, when Mikhail cooled down. Only the look on the guard's face said otherwise. Everyone at the bank already knew what he had been accused of. News was spreading faster than in the dormitory, and mistakes and speculation were being heard on all sides. No one believed in the banker's good name anymore. He drove around the city aimlessly, forgetting his hunger. He was struck by the incident with Michael and tormented by resentment, for he had given his whole soul to his work. There had never been any complaints about him. The man did everything perfectly and demanded the same from his department staff. All documentation was always accurate, issued on time. The plan was fulfilled on a monthly basis. How could this happen? Who had set him up? Why didn't he feel anything, and why was he so secure? All these questions tormented the man until night fell outside. He knew his wife would not be thrilled with his shameful dismissal. The son-in-law of a well-known man should not be spoken of as a thief and a crook. All the gossip and talk that would go around them was already swirling in her head. Zhenyu, though she loved to watch the vulture circling over someone, making their life a living hell, would hardly have been happy if she herself had gotten into such a situation. Reputation played a major role for a woman. She wore her status proudly, like a garment. The wife was not at home. He stood under the cool shower for a long time, refreshed. It had only now dawned on him that he had a loan hanging over him, that he had pledged to repay. How could he admit now that the operation was in jeopardy? He had pledged to pay it all back. What if he couldn't? And what happens when his wife's father finds out? What if the family turns on him? If the boss filed a lawsuit, as he had promised in anger, he would not be able to afford a decent lawyer. Suzanne showed up around 1 o'clock in the morning. All that time he sat tensely in the living room, waiting for the front door to open. He did not call his wife, knowing that in the evenings she was unreachable. The loud music at his favorite hangouts drowned out everything. The woman was drunk. She threw off her high-heeled shoes from her tired legs and staggered toward her husband. "Honey, I'm home," she sang. "And you're not sleeping. Something happened." Suzanne collapsed on the sofa next to her husband. The sight of him sobered her up a little. "You're scaring me. Did someone die?" "I was fired," her husband said softly. "Somebody set me up, twisted one loan as a fraud on my part. The boss couldn't stand it and threw me out right away. I don't know who snitched on him, but I'll find out. Someone needed to take me down. I'm sure it wasn't a mistake." "Are you serious? You're unemployed now? What are we going to live on?" "Begging our dad." That was the first thing on Suzanne's mind. "You've been begging your whole life," he snapped. "What are you worried about? You've never worked a day in your life. Your husband was framed, insulted, humiliated, destroyed the reputation, and you think only that we'll not be able to go out. You hear me, you freak who is picking on who else. You wouldn't have gotten the manager's job without my daddy, you upstart. I'll have you know that you've been in that chair for years, thanks to his call." "Shut up. I earned it. I'm more competent than anyone who's ever applied for it, so don't reproach me." For a few seconds the couple shot each other glances, and Suzanne was the first to liven up. "I will not live with a loser. Get out of my house. Let's see if I can live without your miserable little salary." "Is that what you want?" "I'll leave. This is the last straw. Suzanne, I've seen enough of your girlfriends and your parties and how empty your heads are." The humiliated wife circled him for a while as he packed his suitcase, but the man did not fall for her provocations and did not say another word. It had been a hectic day. Everything was changing too rapidly for him to accept what was happening. At that moment, he really thought that the best solution was to part with his wife. Let it be for a while. Let it be for a while, let it be until the situation becomes clearer, but to live apart. Deep in the night, Emma awoke to a phone call. Max warned her that he was coming and asked for a bed for the night. With difficulty, the woman got into a wheelchair, cleaned herself up, and woke her son to help prepare sleeping quarters for the unexpected guest. All talk was postponed until morning, and they decided to go to bed. There was an oppressive silence at breakfast. The guest told the whole truth, withheld nothing. At first the woman was silent. The hope in her eyes faded instantly. She was not one to believe in miracles. Meeting her sister's longtime lover had alarmed her, made her believe that things could change, and now the future seemed hopeless again. Even thinking in a good way proved foolish. "I don't know what to say," Emma admitted. "I lost my ability to walk because of some scoundrel. And now your career and marriage are ruined because of me. But I didn't mean to. I never meant you any harm." Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her palms to her mouth so that her son in the other room would not hear her sobs. The last thing she wanted to do was to frighten him. The boy was just beginning to come to life again, talking about friends, school, the soccer team his mother would soon take him to. "Don't cry. It's not that bad." The man tried to reassure her, but he could hardly believe that he could find a good way out of this complicated situation. "I have property. I will sell it and pay off the loan. I will save the funds for the operation with all my might. You need it. If it was all meant to get you walking again, you will walk, I promise." He sold everything of any value, the car, various appliances, but the proceeds were not enough to pay off the loan. He tried not to show despair, but they understood. In a short time, the 3 abandoned people in the small apartment became like one family, sharing all their joys and sorrow. Everyday life became easier, thanks to the man's help. The boy never left his side and watched him with admiration. He had never had a father figure to look up to. Although caring for his ailing mother, the boy asked to be considered an adult, he was happy to relax next to a strong man who cared for them with all his might. Looking at the interactions of the male members of the family, the patient realized that her heart was beating too joyfully. One evening, she decided to have a serious talk with a friend. It was not the first day the woman had observed his pensive face and absent gaze. She was sure the man was up to something. "Tell me," she said as she covered the exit from the kitchen with the stroller. "I see you have something on your mind. Tell me. I want to know. I may not walk, but I have a brain. 2 heads are better, as they say." He looked at her and sighed. He hated to give Emma yet another false hope, but it looked like he couldn't do without her help. "I think we have to find out who caused that accident. It can't be that no one saw anything. There has to be some random passerby who remembered the license plate and make of the car, a teenager who videotaped everything and was afraid to confess to his parents that he was skipping class at that moment. I literally feel like someone is breathing down my back. It's unpleasant. I thought it would be over after I was fired, but the feeling won't let go, and I'm used to trusting my gut." "You're right about that." Emma patted his hand. "If the feeling is strong, you shouldn't ignore it. Maybe you're digging in the right direction. I'm sorry, this is going to be painful for you, but I need to know all the details of the accident. Anything you can remember would help a lot." They talked for a long time. It was not an easy conversation. Sometimes the woman would stop halfway through a sentence, unable to control her emotions. She had to relive that nightmare evening when, as always, she had gone out for groceries along the familiar street, the safe crossing. Her life changed in an instant. Someone decided they could break her body like she was an emotionless doll and get away without paying for her tainted fate. Eventually, exhausted by worry and tears, she fell asleep on the man's shoulder. He took her to her bed and put her to bed, realizing that now he was not just seeking justice for the woman. He wanted revenge for her. A few days later, Max met an old friend who worked for the authorities at a cafe. "Good to see you," Andrew said, holding out his hand. "My lunch ends in 40 minutes. I suggest we get down to business." "All right, thank you." He went over the details of the accident with the woman about her diagnosis, her financial situation, and the threat that the boy might be taken from his mother. "I see you've done some serious preparation." Andrew smiled. "I hear you. If it's important to you, I'll do what I can. I have a hacker in mind. He's not exactly within the law, but he helps us a lot to move in the right direction. I won't promise anything, but I'll do my best for you." Max was glad he still had people he could trust with a big secret. The meeting with Andrew was fruitful. Very soon the man received the video recording from the car diva from the supermarket parking lot just as the hit and run occurred. After the incident, the owner of the car left on a long-term business trip, so he did not show up for questioning by the police. He was the indispensable witness that would have allowed the culprit to be discovered immediately. No way. Max moved closer to the laptop screen and intensely scrutinized the faces of the people sitting in the car. Thomas was behind the wheel. He knew him from professional interest, an unpleasant type. It was a painful revelation to him that his companion was Suzanne. The man immediately dropped everything and began to remember where his wife was supposed to be that day, March 14. That date was familiar to the man, for it was his mother-in-law's birthday. He arrived late at his wife's home, only she was no longer there. She had such a headache, which her mother lamented. Only the wife came home late. He did not pay much attention to his wife's shenanigans at the time. In 7 years of marriage, he had grown accustomed to her disappearing forever in the company of similarly spoiled idlers, and she had never been bored. Now, the man realized that he had underestimated his wife for God knows how long she had led him astray by having a lover. What a fool he had been. The man who had hit the woman clearly knew about him, had met him somewhere. Only he couldn't remember where exactly. This unexpected revelation so excited the man that he could not sleep a wink. That night he recalled all of his wife's silly excuses. All her lies now seemed so blatant. Suzanne was taking advantage of the fact that her workaholic husband would not dig into her friendships and be jealous of anyone else. That's why she kicked him out so easily. She was having an affair with Thomas after all. Why should she swap one banker for another? It was not for nothing that she said she could live without his money, for she had found a new sponsor long ago. When the heartache was over, Max's thoughts turned to the identity of his rival. Anything was to be expected from such a man, but hitting a pedestrian, the man suddenly remembered that he had noticed the guard in the banker's company a couple of times. A calculating, ambitious rich man would not just be friends with a simple security guard. They definitely had something in common. He barely waited until dawn to start packing and visit a former colleague. He needed to crack the guard and reveal his connection to his wife's lover. "You're not my colleague anymore. I don't have to say anything," as the man said defiantly as he stood at the gatehouse. Now that he had been fired, Oliver did not need to treat the man with respect, lest he lose his job. He felt that his patron had unleashed his hands and tongue. "Get out of here, or I'll throw you off the property as a suspicious person. You don't know? All right, come back when your shift's over." He made his condition. "We'll talk out of sight." In the evening, having received from a former colleague all the information about the cheater, he went to his wife's house, where he found the lovers. "Why are you here? Get your things when I'm not home." The woman was about to slam the door in her husband's face, but he wouldn't let her. "I know you're with him. Let you be interested in what I came with." The banker greeted his guest with a smirk, lounging on his marriage bed in his underwear. "We are just like in the joke." He laughed loudly. "And you're a hard nut to crack. No scandals, no beatings. I respect you. Keep your respect to yourself. Now look carefully at what I have prepared for you, and then we will discuss." Max thought he'd feel satisfied as he looked at the frightened faces of his lovers, realizing the trap they'd walked into, but he was wrong. He was only getting angrier. "Where did you get that from?" Thomas barely spoke, staring wildly at the screen. There were no witnesses. No one could prove it. "Shut up, you idiot. He might be recording us. It's a confession. What do you want? Mind you, I can do a lot of things. I have money, and I can talk to my boss. He'll take you back." "That's right." Without a shadow of a smile, the man replied, "I like business people. It just so happens that the woman in the video is a friend of mine. After the accident, she cannot walk. She needs an operation, such a sum." The man wrote the number in the diary in advance and handed the sheet. "Try to get out of it somehow. Keep in mind the record is already on my policeman friend's work computer. There is no other way. We need to pay her whatever she needs." That night, Max returned victorious, bringing a fancy dinner and a bottle of red wine ordered from the restaurant. Seeing his happy face, the woman immediately understood everything. The man sat down in front of her and kissed her. He had wanted to do it for so long, but he did not dare. Another feeling of euphoria from the fact that everything terrible was over broke down barriers. I thought I would never wait. The woman laughed through her tears, kissing him on the tip of his nose. Come quickly to the kitchen before Dennis sees. Dinner passed merrily and pleasantly, but the boy had to be soothed for a long time. He was so relieved that his mother would soon recover, that they would not be separated, that he could be a child again and run carefree in the yard, chasing the ball with the neighbor boy. Mama, I want my uncle to be my daddy. He loves us, doesn't he? The boy whispered before going to bed when his mother stopped by to kiss him and say good night. He will stay with us. Don't worry. She herself felt like she was about to burst, realizing in part that she had finally found her love and the path to healing. After 2 weeks, the lovers were able to collect the amount and pay it off, and the couple filed for divorce, wasting no time. Emma headed to the best clinic in town for a consultation. Endless trips to doctors and tests began. She looked exhausted on such days, but did not lose her smile. She knew that all this fuss pales before what comes after. The man never left her side, surrounded her with love and care. What if it didn't work out? She worried. What if I stay in the wheelchair? Max, you are a very good person, and you deserve a full, healthy woman. If it doesn't work out, I'll know what you need. I need you, period. The man kissed his sweetheart. I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. Emma was worried for nothing. The operation was a success, as the doctors assured her. Rehabilitation took a long 7 months, but the woman was surprisingly tenacious. She did not succumb to despondency and never missed a session with a physical therapist. The doctors marveled at her success, motivating other desperate patients to fight for their health. A year had passed since they had met. Emma was no longer sobbing in bed, unable to move her legs. She danced in front of the stove, cooking dinner for her family. The energetic Dennis made friends and was out all day long as soon as he finished his homework. The boy became the favorite of his math teacher, who had been puzzled by his failure last year. The man's business, too, was booming. With the money he received from the bank, he paid off his debt to the bank and was able to invest in a profitable business. He bought a pavilion in a shopping center and opened a furniture store. Previously, the man had not noticed his interest in interior design. He rarely paid attention to the environment around his thoughts, swirling around numbers. But change touched him, allowing his imagination to get out of the box. His parents took their son's drama hard. They had no idea what kind of snake-natured woman they had pushed him toward. "Forgive us, honey," cried the man's mother. "We meant well. After all, we didn't think she would turn out to be almost a murderer." "I owe you an apology," Father said one day. He always found it hard to admit his guilt, but this time the situation was no trifle. "I'm sorry that I suppressed your will, and I'm surprised at what a strong and determined man you grew up to be. I am proud of you. Almost broke you, but you stood your ground. That's worth a lot. Take care of your family. Your wife is beautiful." The wedding was celebrated in early September when the sun was out. The man thought it was impossible to love more. And then he saw his bride dressed in a gorgeous white dress with a wreath on her head and a veil that gave the image mystery and tenderness, and he fell in love again. "I am the happiest man in the world," he whispered to his wife as he put an engagement ring on her finger. "And I am the happiest woman and mother of 2 children, smiled slyly Emma. At the most responsible moment, the groom laughed out loud, which surprised all the guests, and gently twirled his wife. The party was a success. Everyone who wanted to dance danced until they were sore. Those who wanted to have fun laughed until late at night and toasted to the health of the young couple. Andrew, who played a key role in restoring justice, witnessed and kept many videos. This time, the ones that elicited hilarious smiles rather than tears. When Emma was 7 months pregnant, the family moved into a spacious apartment where everyone had their own room. Now Dennis wasn't shy about inviting friends over and throwing toys everywhere. "Hey, baby girl, your mommy, daddy, and brother already love you and are waiting for you. Don't call her before she's due." The woman immediately became indignant. The 2 months flew by unnoticed. The last week before the birth, her husband went crazy, packing a bag for her to take to the clinic. The role of father of a tiny creature was new to him. He wondered if he could do it. But as soon as the man took the sleeping baby girl in his arms for the first time, he realized that being a father was the best happiness in the world, and the little girl still got her smile from her mother.